Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Allison Thompson, and I am the Executive Director of the Center for Guaranteed Income Research at the School of Social Policy and Practice at the University of Pennsylvania. On behalf of the Global Income Security Network, I am pleased to welcome you to the first of our webinar series entitled Guaranteed Income: Global Efforts for Dignified Living. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide a general introduction to guaranteed income and to share case examples of income security experiments around the world, highlighting various policy, programmatic, and research approaches in this space. I want to thank the Seoul Metropolitan Government and specifically Yoonha Lee for organizing our webinar today and gathering our panel of esteemed colleagues. I am pleased to welcome our panel of presenters today. We will hear from Dr. Kimberlin, the Executive Director of the Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality from the Stanford Basic Income Lab in California. She will introduce the fundamental concepts and definitions related to basic income, universal basic income, guaranteed income, and the negative income tax, all within the context of her work at Stanford's Basic Income Lab. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kim, Associate Professor in the Department of Economics at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. He will provide an overview of the Seoul Safety Income Project, explaining what safety income is, sharing the context of South Korea's current social security system, highlighting initial findings from the first-year interim evaluation, and casting a vision for the future of the income security system. Next, Mr. Strauss is a senior program manager at the Office of Community Wealth within the City of Los Angeles's Community Investment for Families Department. Mr. Strauss will present information from LA's largest guaranteed income program, which provided $1,000 unconditional cash for 12 months for 3,200 families. He will talk about lessons learned in policy implementation, program administration, and community engagement related to Big Leap. Next, Dr. Young is a qualitative research scientist at the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Guaranteed Income Research. She will provide an overview of her center's portfolio of guaranteed income studies across the United States, highlighting the center's research approach, which is grounded in mixed methods and focusing on innovative aspects of place and population within their work. Finally, Ms. Velho is a policy manager at MIT's Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab, known as JPAL Global. She will speak about the work that JPAL is doing to advance social protection policy in low and middle income countries, and will share evidence led by researchers in the JPAL network. We'll begin our webinar today by hearing briefly from our panelists as they introduce themselves and tell us about their current roles. After these introductions, each panelist will present on their portfolio of guaranteed income work. Finally, we will end our webinar with a question and answer segment. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Kimberlin to briefly introduce herself, followed by Dr. Kim, Mr. Strauss, Dr. DeYoung, and Ms. Velho.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. I'm Sarah Kimberlin. I'm the Executive Director and a Senior Research Scholar at the Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality. And we are the home also of the Stanford Basic Income Lab. Before joining Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality in my current role, I have served in a variety of different positions focused on policy and practice related to economic security and housing needs, and have had a lot of focus on analyzing policies, including state policies and budgets in the California context and also in the United States federal context. And I also have experience consulting for nonprofits and philanthropy and cross-sector partnerships. And one of the things I'm excited about in terms of my role with respect to the Stanford Basic Income Lab is it is an opportunity to connect research with other kinds of policy stakeholders and research stakeholders around this important topic. In terms of my educational background, I have a bachelor's degree from Harvard and a master's and PhD from the University of California at Berkeley, and am currently here at Stanford. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you. Here. And I will pass it back to Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Dr. Kimberlin. Dr. Kim, we'd love to hear your introduction.
Hi, my name is Brian Kim. I'm a professor at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I'm one of the PI of the Seoul Safety Income Project. I'm a development economist. I have been implemented a lot of many RCTs in different countries, and I'm super excited to implement RCD in my country. This is the Seoul Safety Income Project. Is the first social experiment in South Korea. I'm super excited to introduce the concept and 1-year results. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Strauss.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here today. I'm Aaron Strauss. I'm the Senior Program Manager for the Office of Community Wealth within the City of Los Angeles Community Investment for Families Department. And our city department had the pleasure of administering Big Leap, which is LA's guaranteed income pilot program. At the time, it was the largest in the United States. And it was a great experience understanding the power of unconditional cash. Earlier in my career, I worked for the mayor's office in the city of New York on policy implementation. Also have experience in the private sector, and I graduated from Cornell University. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. DeYoung.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. My name is Dr. Elizabeth DeYoung. I'm a qualitative research scientist at the Center for Guaranteed Income Research at the University of Pennsylvania, where I help to lead data collection, analysis, and write-up of all of our findings for guaranteed income pilots across the United States. Previous to my work at CGIR, I received my doctorate from the University of Liverpool, where I looked at post-conflict politics and planning in Northern Ireland. But common to all of my research is an interest in using qualitative methods and a place-based approach to moving forward social policy and narrative change.
Thank you. And Ms. Velho.
Thanks for the introduction, Dr. Thompson. My name is Beatrice Velho. I am a policy manager at the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab based at MIT. So I work for this lab's, which is also known as JPAL, for our global office, where I support our social protection sector, which focuses on identifying effective programs in low and middle income countries that provide financial assistance to low income families, ensure families against shocks, break poverty traps, and support people through the life cycle. And ahead of joining JPAL, I've been in this role, in this team for the past 3 years. Before that, I worked at the Climate Policy Initiative, a research center focused on policies to tackle climate change. I was also a social entrepreneur for a while. And in terms of education, I've graduated with a master's degree in public administration and international development from the Harvard Kennedy School, and with a bachelor's in economics from the Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you all. It's so exciting to be here with you. So at this time, we will begin our panel presentations with Dr. Kimberlin.
Great. So I am excited to start off our webinar with some introductory information. So I'm going to speak about some basic fundamental concepts about basic income and definitions, and then also provide an overview of some of the resources that the Stanford Basic Income Lab provides for individuals who are interested in basic income from a variety of different perspectives. So again, I'll start off with talking about some fundamental concepts and definitions. Then I'll speak about roles and resources that the Stanford Basic Income Lab provides. And we'll finish off by just touching briefly on a few examples of basic income programs in the United States and globally. And that will transition us into our other speakers who will be speaking about more specifically about different pilots and programs that they have been involved with or have done research related to. So just starting off with some very basic definitions, because there are, I think, a lot of different terms that are used in this space. So I think it's helpful to talk about some of the key concepts that are within the idea of basic income and some of the different ways that this basic concept has taken shape in different pilots and programs around the world. So a key sort of basic definition is that basic income is a regular cash payment to members of a community without a work requirement or other conditions and with no restrictions on how the money can be spent. That's a basic definition, but then that has taken a number of forms in different concrete contexts. So again, this basic idea has taken on different forms in different contexts, and some of the key aspects on which it varies depend on the eligible population for the payments, the size of the individual cash payments, the frequency, how often payments are distributed, and also the funding structure for how it's paid for. And so there are a variety of kind of different specific kind of concepts of basic income that I will mention here, and some of these will come into play in more detail in some of the presentations by the later speakers. So one concept to start with is the idea of universal basic income, and that would be again income available to everyone within a population generally, with no conditions on who would be eligible for it. Distributed to individuals typically, and usually the amount the same for everyone, usually considered to be distributed on a monthly basis, although it can be distributed on other bases as well. And this idea is more of a concept than something that has been truly implemented at scale, but this is kind of a fundamental concept that a lot of basic income pilots and programs envision as a kind of a form that this could take at a grand scale if it were implemented on a universal basis. A similar concept would be unconditional basic income. And again, this is really often a sort of a similar term for the same kind of idea as universal basic income. Another way this concept has been talked about is as a freedom dividend. And again, this specific proposal has been targeted to adults, so citizens who are 18 years or older, distributed on an individual basis. It's $1,000 monthly. Then we come to guaranteed income. And this is a concept that has gotten a lot of traction recently, and we'll definitely talk about this in depth with some of the other speakers here. But this is more of a targeted approach. So rather than being distributed universally to all individuals within a particular, say, country or geography or that kind of a thing, usually it's targeted to specific individuals, for example, who have an income below a certain threshold or who have other specific criteria, specific characteristics. And again, this is the idea of guaranteed income is typically tied to a certain floor. So the idea being an amount that allows recipients to reach a defined income floor. Although again, how that plays out in different contexts can be a little bit different. Another related concept is the idea of a negative income tax. And so this is the idea of, again, targeted. So the residents whose income is less than a defined cutoff when they file their taxes would receive funding back as a kind of a negative tax or like a refund format. And so again, the amount here typically would varied based on income and income cutoff. And this, rather than being distributed on a monthly basis, would normally be distributed on an annual basis. So this tax filing often typically takes the form of an annual exercise. And then a final one, final two that I would highlight are specific examples that have been really important in the conversation in the United States in particular. One is the Earned Income Tax Credit. This has some commonalities with basic income in that is an unrestricted cash payment, but also some differences. One being that it targeted specifically to residents with earned income from formal labor below a certain cutoff. So only targeted to individuals who are working in formal employment. And also distributed on an annual basis typically. And then finally, I'll highlight a child tax credit or child allowance as another form that has gotten a lot of attention recently in the United States and in other places around the world. Again, this has some similarities to basic income in being unrestricted in how it can be spent and typically distributed on a periodic basis. Again, however, targeted to residents with children and often in different contexts with children who have income below a certain cutoff. So these are just a few examples of different ways that this basic concept has been kind of operationalized. You'll notice as we hear from the other speakers that it can look a little bit different in different contexts, and there's a lot of kind of flexibility across the concept to develop the kind of individual components. But again, focusing on the key fundamental core values of being unrestricted and regular payments without conditions related to work or other kinds of participation structures. So moving on, I want to speak a little bit about the Stanford Basic Income Lab. We really, at the Basic Income Lab, aim to be a resource for different kinds of stakeholders who have an interest in basic income. As I mentioned before, Basic Income Lab is part of the Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality. So our center has a broader interest in research and dissemination of information about poverty and inequality, including interventions to address poverty and inequality. So that's where being the home of the Basic Income Lab ties into our overall mission. And in terms of the Basic Income Lab's, specific focus, we focus on one, compiling learning from policymakers and practitioners who are implementing basic income pilots and programs. Two, equipping the field with insights about the growth and evolution of basic income experiments and pilots and programs. And then three, convening stakeholders around issues related to basic income and implementation of basic income and related cash policies. So again, we have a variety of publications that are for different kinds of basic income stakeholder audiences. So resources for local governments that are looking to start pilots, resources for researchers who are looking for reviews of the literature on basic income. So a variety of different kinds of publications and resources. We have a visualization of UBI research, which could be a useful resource for people who are interested in different aspects of basic income. And I want to just quickly click over to the actual. I hope this is working properly. So if we click through here, so great. You can see a variety of different aspects of basic income and a summary of research related to them. I just like to show people this resource because there's so much. UBI is so interesting because it connects to so many different issues that have that connect to different kinds of interest groups and stakeholders across all a different variety of areas. And so this is one way of exploring the different kinds of research that relates to different issues that might be a path by which someone has an interest in UBI or an interest in analyzing UBI. So that's that resource. We also have an experiments map, which again is a resource that is available for people to explore. And so I just want to showcase some of the, we attempt to keep this updated with information. We update it periodically with information about pilots and programs that are ongoing or have been concluded around. I'll start by talking about the ones around the United States. And, I think others may speak about this some, but there is a long history of an interest in basic income within the United States, going all the way back to hundreds of years back, but also more recently in the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States, an important civil rights movement leader in the 1960s, had a strong focus on the idea of guaranteed income. And then more recently, there have been a number of guaranteed income pilots and experiments, particularly since about 2016 or so, again, tied into groups like Mayors for a Guaranteed Income and Economic Security Project, and other local governments and local organizations that have really embraced this idea and taken the opportunity to implement different kinds of programs around the United States. And that leads me to another resource we have on the Basic Income website, which is the Guaranteed Income Pilots Dashboard. And this is a resource in collaboration with the Center for Guaranteed Income Research at University of Pennsylvania, so the organization where Allison and Elizabeth are based. And this is a dashboard that focuses on highlighting a specific set of guaranteed income pilot projects that are being evaluated by the Center for Guaranteed Income Research, and just highlights a lot of important information about those. And as the research is coming out, it highlights important research results. So again, I will just quickly show you the actual resource itself. So again, just to give you a sense of the kind of information available here, we have information about how pilot recipients have been spending the guaranteed income payments. And so that's a question that comes up a lot with people interested in this issue. And then detailed information about various of these different pilots, the set of pilots that are being evaluated by CGIR. And I will use this as an opportunity to just highlight some of the things that's, I think, really exciting and interesting about the pilots and programs that are underway around the United States right now is a variety of different specific target populations that are the focus for different experiments. And so I will show you, for example, if we click through to the experiment in Cambridge, the pilot in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This one specifically focuses on parents with single parents with children living in Massachusetts in the northeastern part of the United States. And just to show you kind of a snapshot of the kinds of information that we have available on the dashboard to allow people to kind of understand what's going on with these different pilots. Just quickly, another one I might highlight, just again to give you a flavor of the different kinds of target populations that this intervention has been focused on. This program in New Orleans is focused on young people, so young adults who are disconnected from work and school. So that's another different kind of target population, again, with a similar kind of information available. And then, it's just a third example. This project in New York City specifically focused on mothers of newborns and for the first 1,000 days of life of their children. So again, another way of thinking about targeting basic income to different specific populations. And again, as the evaluations of these projects are concluded, the evaluation information will be going up on our site as well. So again, that's the Guaranteed Income Pilots Dashboard. Our experiments map also has a lot of international examples around the world, so very excited to hear about some of these examples from Ho later on in the presentation, but just want to make people aware that that's a resource that people can go to as well. So, and I will conclude there, and I am very much looking forward to hearing from the specific examples from our other speakers. So I will hand it back to Dr. Thompson. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kimberlin. That was excellent and a great way to start our webinar. Thank you so much for that information. At this time, we're going to hand it over to Dr. Kim to tell us a little bit about the Seoul Safety Income Project.
Hi, thank you for having me. Let me briefly introduce Seoul Safety Income Project. My name is Hyunchul Bryant Kim. I'm working at Hong Kong University of Science Technology. Seoul consists of, Seoul is the main, capital city of South Korea, consists of 25 districts. Total number of population is about 10 million. This is big metropolitan city. And we are implementing a randomized control trial income, safety income project. Little bit background of the welfare system of South Korea. The major system is National Basic Livelihood Security System. This is has been implemented 20 years. But there's a limitations. Concerns are raised. Number one, insufficient support. Total amount delivered is not enough for some people. And the more important one is complicated eligibility conditions. It depends upon recipient income, wealth, and even income of family members. So if your son or daughter never talk to with you, their income increases, then it affects your welfare status. And it also has some disincentive for labor supply, and also admin cost is pretty high. That's a big that's a challenge. Oh, one more thing, welfare blind spot, like because of the complicated eligibility conditions, some people are lost, some people will not found, and some people suicide. So these are the major challenges for existing welfare system, which we call NBLSS, National Basic Livelihood Security System. And income inequality, like in last few years, increases in South Korea, especially during the COVID-19, and also workforce structures, labor market has been changes. Gig economy also hit the Korean society. Temporary employment has been increases in the last 20 years and even more in the last few years. So that's a background. We are proposing a new welfare system, which is modified negative income tax. We call this a Seoul Safety Income Project. Idea and committee consisted is made in 2021, and the first experiment was implemented in 2022, and 2023 the phase 2, another 10,000, another round, and this year we also recruit the new people. So 2022 total number of households selected is 500. That's a treatment group. The control group is double, so 1,000 control group. The number of applicants is about 33,000 households, and we select treatment group for 500 household, control group 1,000. The phase 2, 76,000 households applied. That's about 1%. A little bit less than the 1% of the entire household in Seoul, and we select 1,100 for treatment group and 2,200 for the control group. 2024, different idea, but we also slightly different target program, but we also phase another sample for the treatments. Yep. Seoul safety income is modified negative income tax. Eligibility condition is only income and asset. Income eligibility is household with standard median income below 85. So median is in the middle, right? People in the middle, 85. So close to middle. If you are close to middle, slightly lower than the middle, then you are eligible. And asset condition is 326 million won. That's about 300,000 US dollar. So roughly like poor people, generally poor people are all eligible for these conditions. Like phase 1 to 3, I already explained. Benefits is the Seoul metropolitan government provides the 50%, half of the difference between standard median income of 85% of the standard median income and household income. I'm going to explain in the graph here. So in the x-axis, we have an x-axis, y-axis. X-axis is household income, and y-axis is disposable income. So after welfare system, if the government do nothing, then your household income and not disposable, sorry, it says after tax income is 45-degree line, 45-degree line. So if you do nothing, then this is 45-degree line, and the yellow one is the amount of money we provide to poor households. So if your household income is below 85% of median income, standard median income, then we provide money. But if you earn less, then we provide more. So how much we provide? 50 right side rectangle, right side rectangle. 50% of the differences between 85% of standard median income minus your income. So for example, if you have zero income, then how much you provide? It depends on number of the household size. If it is only one person, 85% of standard median income is 1,400. Then we provide 682. If it is four-person households, then the median 85% of median income is 3,500. Then the Seoul metropolitan government provide $1,758 US dollar. So basic idea is that Seoul Safety Income Project provide more income support to the lower income households. Okay, so that's a basically negative income tax, right? But Seoul metropolitan government provide money, but also the existing system, we do not tear the existing system. But for example, medical support and like Medicaid in South Korea, they still provide the medical services. But the cash, they decided to change it from like NBLSS, the existing system, to safety negative income tax. Okay, so main feature, number one, eligibility for SSIP depends solely on income and wealth. And the number two, SSIP covers more households in terms of both income and wealth. So we cover, like, compared to NBLSS, we cover more people and provide more money. Number three, SSIP benefits are larger than NBLSS. Yes, already explained. And SSIP benefits do not vary by wealth, but NBLSS it does. Yep. And another feature is that we argue that these SSIP do not harm labor supply because it's not a step function, it's a linear function of your income. The supply is the benefit is linear function of your income, so that there's no reason to manipulate your income. But the MBLSS, there's a step function, so there is some possibility they decide not to provide any labor supply. Yep. And we expect that since SSIP provides larger benefit, there is an impact on reduced labor supply, right? So if you get the more money from the benefit, you have some incentive. As a result, you may decide not to supply, not to participate in the labor market. But at the same time, if we compare this program to existing system, NBLSS, then there's they more likely to participate in the labor supply, because NBLSS is a step function, so there's always a manipulations and disincentive to work, but SSIP it doesn't. And we also think consumption increases, parents' education, family stability increases, and these are kind of natural expectation. So let's move on to the first year outcomes. Yes, number one is food. Number two, medical services, use of medical services, and use of the transportations. Yeah, it all increases by 10%, 20%, 30%, like medical services 30%, transportation about 20% increases. And food expenditure also increases, nutrition status improved. And the private transfer and charitable donations also significantly increases, which is interesting. They are super poor people, but when they got some money, they give the money to their friends, their relatives. Also, they donate the money to church and other NGOs. More. Mental health, self-esteem, depression, stress level, these are all improved very significantly. Like how much? 20%, about like 15 to 20% of standard deviation. So this is not small. Like it's significantly improved the mental health. And job satisfaction, job satisfaction index improved like about 3%, 3.5%. Let me move on. So summary of the finding, like mental health increases, nutrition, food expenditure, or other increases. Labor supply decreases. Labor supply decreases overall, but compared to MBLSS, we do not find decreases of labor supply. But these are the first year very short-term outcomes. So we are basically looking at the long-term outcomes. At the same time, like although labor supply decreases, think about that. What does it mean? If you are like Koreans in the elderly, especially elderly in South Korea, they kind of forced to join the poor labor market. Many of them are self-employed. They collect the garbages in the streets, and if labor market quality of the job they choose increases, although they decreases labor supply, we think it is a positive impact. But we are looking for we are deeper for labor supply. But overall, labor supply obviously decreases, which is corresponding to the previous RCTs of negative income tax like 40 years ago in the US and Canada. And in the summer, we plan to present the second year impact in a couple of conferences, in a couple of coming conferences. I think the future. So Korean society, we have big debates about the new welfare system. Number one is the existing system, MBLSS. Maybe we can provide more benefits to MBLSS and try to decrease its blind spot. Another one is the Seoul safety income, negative income tax. That's another alternative. The last alternative is basic income. But as of now, we think basic income for Korean society is still too expensive to implement, provide a large, like significant amounts of money. So we instead, at this point, we try to like improve the existing, either improving the existing welfare system or negative income tax. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim, for sharing the innovative and exciting work taking place in Seoul, and we look forward to hearing more as your study continues. Next up, we're excited to hear from Mr. Strauss.
As already mentioned, my name is Aaron Strauss, and I am the Senior Program Manager for Community Wealth Initiatives out of the City of Los Angeles Community Investment for Families Department. And before I get into our own Guaranteed Income Pilot Program, I first wanted to talk about the values and the mission of our department. As mentioned, Community Investment for Families Department, a couple of those keywords there suggest what we are focused on. We try to break the cycle of generational poverty through a lens of building community wealth. In service of that goal, we invest in vulnerable families and neighborhoods within Los Angeles in order to create opportunities for all living in Los Angeles to prosper. And in addition to our Guaranteed Income Pilot Program, we run a number of high-impact anti-poverty and financial empowerment programs, including the Family Source Center System, which is a network of 19 nonprofit centers where folks can drop in and receive a number of services from financial coaching to food banks and more. We also have a survivor services division, which focuses on the victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. And then my team runs a number of other projects, including a children's savings account program. We're involved in the coalition in Los Angeles that provides free tax prep services to low-income Angelenos and much more. That's all in service of expanding economic opportunities for low-income Angelenos. And our Guaranteed Income Pilot fits right into that philosophy. With that in mind, we truly do believe that regardless of their situation, every Angeleno and every human being deserves to be able to meet their basic needs. And most importantly, we believe that government, our department included, can play a key role in ensuring that level of support. Through a program like Guaranteed Income, we are able to secure dignity, trust, and collaborate with our communities to guide the very work that benefits them. And the way that we see guaranteed income differing from how traditional social safety net programs have operated is that, as our colleagues discussed already, there are fewer requirements, such as employment requirements. There are fewer burdensome eligibility processes. And once folks are in the program, fewer acid tests that might put their participation at risk. So all of these decisions, these policy decisions, support our core values of dignity and trust in the participants that we serve. Now, getting to the details of our program, Big Leap stands for Basic Income Guaranteed Los Angeles Economic Assistance Pilot. And between January 2022 and April 2023, we supported 3,200 participants with $1,000 per month for 12 months each in no strings attached unconditional cash. To give a bit more detail about what the landscape looks like in the city of Los Angeles, we're a city of about 3.9 million people. We have a county of about 10 million people. In the state of California, we have 40 million people, and we do have a fairly high poverty rate. You'll see here, our poverty rate for all Angelenos is about 17%. That's the federal poverty level as a benchmark. And that more than doubles when we're just considering single female-headed families with children. And you'll see as we get to the demographic data portion of this presentation, that really is the typical participant in our program. It's a single mother of children below the federal poverty level. Those problems are not just based on family structure, they also show across ethnicity and race. So while 17% of all Angelenos are living below the federal poverty level, that increases to almost 25% when talking about Black African-American Angelenos. So we know that there are intersecting issues that impact folks with various backgrounds. Getting into the creation of our program, all the way back in 2019, former Mayor Michael Tubbs launched the SEED program in Stockton, California, a city in the north of California, where 125 participants received unconditional payments of $500 a month for 24 months. Subsequently, Mayor Tubbs created Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and former Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, who helped to launch our program, was one of the 11 founding members of the MGI coalition. In 2021, Mayor Garcetti proposed a $24 million guaranteed income program in our city, and that budget eventually rose to $38.4 million of direct disbursements to participants after being supplemented by members of our city council. And finally, in 2022, Big Leap launched in partnership with Mayors for a Guaranteed Income and the University of Pennsylvania Center for Guaranteed Income Research. All of our participants were selected, notified of their selection, enrolled in the program, and the monthly $1,000 payments began. Now to center on our program goals and research design. Of course, this is an anti-poverty program at its core. We want participating families to have better outcomes in financial, mental, and physical health, among a number of other areas. We want to encourage economic activity within vulnerable communities, and I'll get into our exact eligibility requirements soon. This is also a research study to demonstrate the short and long-term impacts of the policy. I mentioned we partner with our colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania to study how participants fare before, during, and after participation in this program. And finally, for those who may be less convinced by the qualitative and quantitative data gathered in our research report, we want to change the narrative around how folks view poverty via storytelling opportunities featuring our participants. And I'll get a bit into our media approach a little bit later. But first, our research design. As mentioned, we partnered with the University of Pennsylvania, CGIR, to implement a randomized controlled trial. 3,200 applicants were selected to receive the monthly disbursement of $1,000. And then we had a control group of about 5,000 applicants invited to engage in modestly compensated research activities. Those surveys were distributed every 6 months. You'll see here our application was open in October of 2021. Participants were notified and enrolled between December 2021 and April 2022. And then we issued 3 surveys on top of the original application baseline survey in August 2022, February 2023, and August 2023. And finally, I'm happy to share that our final report will be out about a month from now in July of this year. And we're really excited to share those results with the public. Circling back to that application way back in October and November of 2021, our website received over 250,000 visits during that program application window, which was open for about 10 days. And that resulted in over 100,000 individuals completing our self-certification tool, which verified they met the 5 eligibility requirements for the program. And that resulted in over 50,000 people going on to complete the application survey, which collected initial information for the research component. And out of that 50,000 people, we selected our 3,200 treatment and 5,000 control group participants. The 5 eligibility criteria for our program are here on the screen. The first is that participants had to reside in the boundaries of the city of Los Angeles. That is because we were using City of Los Angeles public funds, and we had to serve those living in our city. The second is that they had to be 18 years of age or older due to needing to consent to the research aspect of the program. The third, in line with the goals of our department, as I mentioned, we are trying to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty in Los Angeles, is that all participants had to have a dependent child or be pregnant at the time that they applied. And they needed to have annual income below that federal poverty level I was mentioning earlier for their specific family size. At the time of application, at the end of 2021, for a family of 4, this was about $25,000 a year, which is not nearly enough to survive in Los Angeles. So we were really trying to support those who are most financially vulnerable. And the last, in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, to aid with the city's pandemic recovery from an economic perspective, all of our participants needed to have experienced economic or health hardship related to the pandemic. We partnered with Mobility Capital Finance, also known as MoCaFi, to provide what we called the Angelino Connect Immediate Response Card, which was functionally a debit card on which we were able to load $1,000 per month on the 25th of every month. And the advantage there was that that was already in use for a number of city relief initiatives during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it made it a lot easier for us to leverage. Some of our participants were already familiar with that payment instruments. Some of the key elements that made this beneficial to participants where it offered flexibility. If folks were unbanked or underbanked, they did not need to have a relationship with a large financial institution to be part of our program. Also, there was a customer service component of having an organization paying so much attention to our participants. And then finally, we're able to track aggregate spending data, which feeds into resources like the Stanford Basic Income Lab dashboard, where the public can understand on aggregate how participants in our program and others are spending the funds that they receive. And I'll get into that data in just a little bit. Here we are. Nearly all of the program data have been spent as of our last report. That's $38.4 million total. Of the 37.8 million that had been spent as of the last report from Mocafy, $25.8 million or 68% was taken out in cash, in line with other similar programs. And I will say that the economy in Los Angeles is unique. A lot of folks operate in cash. They receive their wages in cash, they pay their rent in cash. So we hypothesized that some of this high cash withdrawal rate is due to how folks were already operating in the economy. The amount of funds that was trackable via card swipes, the swipes of that Angelino immediate response card I mentioned, amounted to about $12 million and is broken down in the pie chart on the right-hand side here. The four most common trackable spending categories were just basics like food, household goods, transportation, and housing costs, which are 35%, 34%, 12%, and 9% respectively. That already adds up to 90% and more of the amount of spend that was trackable. So we know that our participants, unlike many of the assumptions that folks may make about those experiencing poverty, just are trying to meet their basic needs. They're spending responsibly. They're spending to take care of their children and their households. And this is what our average participant looks like. They're 38 years old. They have a mean income of under $15,000 and a median of under $12,000. As I mentioned, the federal poverty level for a family of four at the time of application here was about $25,000. And I've seen estimates that it takes upwards of about $80,000 to even $100,000 to afford a basic standard of living in Los Angeles for a family of four. So these were some of the most financially vulnerable families in Los Angeles. And that especially plays out when it comes to housing. A lot of our participants were insecurely housed. And the income limits here, the income averages here reflect that. 80% of our participants were female, about half are Hispanic, and almost a third are Black. 2/3 are single, while less than a third are married. And many speak languages other than English in the home. So as I mentioned before, the poverty rate in Los Angeles for single female-headed households was over double that of the average Angelino. And that's why we have 80% female, 50% Hispanic, 30% Black, and 65% single participants. You know, this really is the face of poverty in our city. Now, a really key component of Big Leap is to change the hearts and minds of those who might be coming across guaranteed income for the first time. So in addition to our research report that we're engaged in, we also wanted to make sure that our participants had their chance to tell their story in their own words. So we reached out to our full participant base, asking about their experience with the program throughout the program. And many of them responded in really vulnerable and unique ways. We would then get in touch with them to discuss their interest and maybe their potential fit in engaging with the media. And then as interest arose organically, we connected them with specific media opportunities. And some of the ones we're most excited about were that we were featured in a front page article of the New York Times, a long format article in The Nation magazine, several podcasts, including those put out by the San Francisco Chronicle and LAist, a pretty great documentary called It's Basic in collaboration with the Marriage for Guaranteed Income, and a couple others that you can see on the screen here. And as I mentioned, the goal around this narrative change work is to shed light on public benefit policies and programs like guaranteed income, to shed light on the day-to-day lives of those who are experiencing financial hardship in our city. And so those who are not plugged in might better understand the landscape of poverty, which is quite unique in the city of Los Angeles. I wanted to share a couple quotes directly from our participants here. Rashida said, "It was a big relief. I'm tense, and then I could go, okay, now I can pay this, now I can pay that. It made me feel very good. I got to have some flexibility. I'm glad to be able to do some things that I couldn't do." And Alfonsina, originally in Spanish, mentioned, "My daughter entered the army, so I qualify to fix my papers after 30 years without papers here. The lawyer is going to charge me $6,000. I'm going to use that money to fix my papers." So Alfonsina was not documented and in this country. And because her daughter entered the army, she had the opportunity to enter a pathway towards residency and hopefully ultimately citizenship. And she used half of her Big Leap money to help fix those papers, an opportunity she would not have had. And therefore, she would have had her place in our country threatened if she were not receiving the unconditional cash from Big Leap. Before I wrap up, I wanted to mentioned some common criticisms of guaranteed income programs. There are definitely folks that believe cash infusions will discourage people from working, but pilot evidence shows that participants do not reduce work in response to receiving unconditional income support. More program participants will spend their funds recklessly, but as I've already shown today, our spending data demonstrates participants are just using funds to meet their basic needs. They were all families in our program, which is unique to our program. And we know whether it's talking to them, seeing the spending data, or looking at their answers in our qualitative research survey questions, that they are just trying to support their families. A third criticism is that government can't afford such programs on a grander scale, but we have a number of overlapping crises here. We have recovery from the COVID pandemic, vulnerability to future pandemics, a new wave of labor, which looks more precarious in response to AI and other external factors. So I think it is time for government, including local government, not just federal government, to be as bold as possible in our response to these economic crises that we might be approaching soon. And then a final criticism here is that guaranteed income does not address the root causes of poverty. It maybe in and of itself doesn't do anything to, for example, make the housing more affordable in Los Angeles, but it's not meant to be the only solution. It's meant to supplement the existing social safety net. And in my mind, it serves to ignite discussions on government's role in the economy, the future of work, and the future of the economy itself. And here's my personal case for why guaranteed income is important. We know that it improves many outcomes, including health and employment. It provides options for families' futures while reducing income inequality. It can supplement the existing social safety net. It can disrupt generational poverty. And through helping families meet their basic needs, it reduces stress and anxiety, ultimately creating hope and dignity for brighter futures. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Strauss. As you mentioned, our center has had the privilege of working closely with the Big Leap team in Los Angeles, and we're so excited for the work that you all have done. Thank you for sharing today and for the leadership role that Big Leap has played in the United States in terms of GI programming. You have a lot to be proud of. At this time, we are excited to hear from Dr. DeYoung.
So I'm Dr. Elizabeth DeYoung from the Center for Guaranteed Income Research, and I'm really excited to talk about our work today. The Center for Guaranteed Income Research, or CGIR, is located at UPenn, and our team is headed by its founding directors, Dr. Amy Castro and Dr. Stacia West. Together, they led the design and research for the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, or SEED, and currently serve as the centralized research partners for Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, or MGI, and other partners across the country. The SEED demonstration was launched 6 years ago in 2018 in Stockton, California. And as Mr. Strauss mentioned, 125 randomly selected residents received $500 a month for 2 years. CGIR conducted a randomized controlled trial, or RCT, with comparison. And this was the first study to establish causal evidence of positive health and financial outcomes for recipients of guaranteed income, or GI. After the first year, compared to similar residents enrolled in the study who did not receive cash transfers, those who did receive the cash experienced improved financial security, reduced anxiety and depression, decreases in physical pain, increases in physical functioning, and improved time spent with family. Since the Stockton pilot, there has been a proliferation of guaranteed income pilots across the US, many of which are being studied at our center. Currently, we've published findings or are in the process of conducting research activities for more than 35 sites across the United States. Along with this increase in pilot programs comes an increasing popular interest in GI, particularly among young Americans. Polling in 2023 from the Economic Security Project, or ESP, shows that a majority of Americans support GI, 56% of voters, with pockets of support across party lines. Policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels are interested in how unconditional cash might be incorporated into our current array of safety net services. CGIR is conducting cross-site research to develop a common body of knowledge on unconditional cash transfers. We typically use mixed methods randomized controlled trials in our pilot evaluations, meaning that both surveys and interviews are conducted at each site. CGIR administers these surveys at baseline, every 6 months thereafter, and 6 months after the last disbursement. CGIR also conducts interviews midway through the pilot. And for some pilots, we also do further ethnographic and in-depth qualitative methods. At the end of the pilots, we'll hold a singular data set from sites across the US with approximately 19,000 study participants across treatment and control groups. And this will allow us to conduct an array of sub-analyses with specific populations of interest to determine who unconditional cash works for and how. It will also provide us with the capacity to see how the amount of cash or the duration for which it is provided should be altered based on cost of living and other factors. For each pilot, we produce a white paper for our government partners, community members, and policymakers as part of the American Guaranteed Income Studies, or AMGIS, series, as well as standalone policy briefs and peer-reviewed papers, all of which are available on our website. We've published 6 reports since November 2023, which is extraordinary, with many more to come. The work we're doing with the AMGIS is incredibly innovative. With the exception of a couple of studies, there's very little empirical research on GI in the US, and nothing at this scale. And there are 2 specific aspects of our innovative approach that we'd like to highlight today: the importance of place to this work and the importance of people, understanding individual experiences. So first, place matters. From implementation to analysis, the importance of place cannot be understated. The United States is composed of incredibly diverse political and cultural landscapes, and our pilots exist within a variety of policy subsystems. To understand the localized impacts of GI, we take into account the ways in which participants may or may not be supported by local government systems, and how participants interact with existing social safety net programs. In the US, social programs include access to resources such as food, childcare, housing subsidies. These are often referred to as benefits. Eligibility and availability of benefits differs widely according to local, state, and federal levels. They are limited to specific and predetermined uses. For instance, food assistance programs only include particular foods. Housing vouchers may only be used in places that accept them. This is a contrast to unconditional cash transfers like the GI, which allow recipients to decide how to best support themselves and their families. Access to benefits is determined by means testing, where the government assesses an individual's total income and assets. However, these programs vary significantly on eligibility requirements and income calculations. Many workers earn too much in the labor market to qualify for assistance programs, but their wages still do not cover the cost of basic needs like food, housing, or healthcare. Others experience the benefits cliff, where a small increase in household earnings can lead to a reduction in public benefits that they depend on to survive. People on the benefits cliff tend to be less able to take risks or make choices that lead to mobility and achievement. They are constrained by survival mode, weighing the relative impact of their decisions on the ability to access critically needed assistance programs. So an ethical and practical consideration of implementing GI alongside means-tested benefits is the risk of existing benefit reduction or disqualification. Some of our program partners administering the GI have secured benefits waivers that safeguard GI recipients' existing benefits. Some states have also recognized this, passing legislation to exempt GI from participants' household income, and thereby protecting their benefits. But some states have not done so, underlining how that social safety net differs according to place in the US. Our pilots typically include individualized benefits counseling for participants before they receive the GI, which helps them to make an informed decision about its potential interaction with means-tested benefits. So for instance, people may opt out of a pilot if they might lose a major benefit like a housing voucher or Social Security. Others choose to enroll anyway, knowing they may lose eligibility for some benefits like food assistance programs. We do not advocate for eliminating the safety net and replacing it with guaranteed income. It is designed to work alongside existing social assistance programs. So at every step of the pilot implementation, we're working with local community-based organizations and government partners to take the specificity of place into consideration. During research design, we use similar core survey measures to allow for cross-site comparison, but each pilot city can also choose to add on several additional unique survey domains that are specifically relevant to their local site. And this ensures that the survey is responsive and individualized. For instance, our Iowa site included domains on educational outcomes for school-age youth. Los Angeles wanted to look at the extent of interpartner violence. During our analysis, we conduct extensive background research on each place's history, geography, and the unique structural and environmental factors that either constrain or boost the GI's impact. And this helps us to better situate our findings and account for their complexities. We look at factors like the cost of living and the availability of affordable housing and childcare, for instance, in order to identify the existing resources that help participants stretch the impact of GI and systemic barriers that participants still face in leveraging the cash. For instance, we recently published findings on Cambridge, Massachusetts. And this city stands out for its renowned academic institutions, Harvard, MIT, its status as a hub of innovation, the headquarters for pharmaceutical labs and tech giants and startups. But beneath its veneer of prosperity and diversity, Cambridge grapples with the stark realities of social and economic inequality. Longtime residents struggle to find their footing in a rapidly evolving landscape that threatens to erode the rich sense of history and the city's sense of place as well. The astronomical cost of living, driven by the city's success, has pushed out lower income residents who no longer feel they belong. And it was important that we grounded our findings in this context. For instance, in our pilot, GI recipients often worked full-time as skilled support or administrative staff at those universities, laboratories, and tech firms for which Cambridge is renowned. And yet their wages had not kept pace with inflation or the cost of living, and they struggled to make ends meet. This meant that these residents also remained locked out of homeownership and other long-term financial goals. Recipients were also full-time caregivers, many in the sandwich generation, meaning they were taking care of children and aging parents simultaneously. Many were juggling paid work, unpaid care, and household responsibilities against a backdrop of financial precarity. And in turn, they had little opportunity to spend quality time with their families or take time for themselves in the relentless cycle of getting by. Cambridge, recognizing these disparities, has taken innovative approaches to promote housing access, universal childcare, and educational opportunities for its residents. And we analyzed and interpreted our research findings while taking all of this context into account. Building out the environment within which the GI was operating really allowed us to understand the data more fully and really narrate the story of Cambridge and its people. And we found that despite existing systemic barriers, GI helped improve short-term financial well-being for many. Quantitative findings, you can see, found a statistically significant improvement in participants' mean incomes and lower income volatility as compared to the control group. Housing cost burden also decreased significantly for the treatment group compared to control. Qualitative findings suggested that the GI validated participants' sense of belonging in the city and underlined a sense of trust between individuals and government. We also identified places where the city could further bolster support for their residents. And so while Cambridge's pilot occurred within a fairly robust policy context, other areas of the country do not have such strong safety nets or local universal benefits. we have found that the impacts of GI are more limited in these places. A gap between low wages and a high cost of living, a lack of affordable housing opportunities, and high childcare costs were some of the factors that constrained GI's impact in other places we've researched. Another aspect of place that we study is the way in which it shapes the beliefs and behaviors and life experiences of participants, the opportunities available to them, their goals for the future, their perspectives on social issues, and their sense of rootedness and belonging. So another one of our reports on Richmond, Virginia, situated participants' desires for economic mobility within the city's historically vibrant Black community. Despite the pressures of Jim Crow-era segregation, the city was home to several thriving Black neighborhoods, including a Black Wall Street, Black-owned homes and businesses. In the past, there was a collective emphasis on generational mobility among Black Richmonders, and many therefore grew up in a cultural milieu of educational achievement and optimism and confidence. This was before racist planning and policy measures like redlining took hold. But we saw those echoes of confidence in the narratives of present-day residents, many of whom cited home ownership as an ultimate goal, and who used the GI to actively build their savings and repair their credit. So all of this place-based work is so important in providing critical context for participant narratives. And on a broader level, it also serves to identify the strengths and opportunities in different policy subsystems, the commonalities and differences between sites, what places are doing right, and where they could direct resources to improve. So secondly, people's experiences matter. Although many of our study sites include people in the general population experiencing financial precarity, we also have some sites that are experimenting with unconditional cash among targeted populations, whose unique experiences necessitate a financial buffer. Our work is giving voice to experiences of subgroups that might otherwise go unrecognized. For instance, some of our pilots focus on individuals who are involved with systems historically grounded in racism and inequity. We have forthcoming findings on 2 GI pilots among formerly incarcerated adults returning to their communities. People coming home from prison face extraordinary debts, fines, and fees from their release. And if these payments can't be made, the person can be reincarcerated. Upon reentry, they often also struggle to find employment and stable housing, hardships which impact their family networks as well. We are looking at GI's potential to stabilize and support these adults as they rebuild their lives, reconnect to their families and communities, and prioritize their own well-being. Another pilot focuses on youth aging out of foster care in Los Angeles. Young people age out of care when they are forced by the state to leave the foster care system at the age of majority. And so they frequently lack family support, have often suffered traumatic experiences, and many times have few resources. When they age out of foster care, they are often left to make their own way without much social and financial support. Many experience homelessness or fall into debt. So for this population, we're studying GI's potential to foster more support during youth's transition out of state-supported care, like finding stable housing or pursuing educational opportunities. Still another pilot launched by New York State's Office of Children and Family Services, OCFS, is providing GI to families reported to the Child Protective Services systems for non-safety concerns related to neglect or poverty. The state is experimenting with providing unconditional cash as a preventative measure to address poverty-related concerns and thereby avoid the need for more intensive and invasive services when safety concerns are not present. In other words, this pilot explores the impact of cash to address material hardship, build financial stability, and avoid future involvement with child protective services. Together, these pilots highlight GI's potential impact for those who have experienced hardship and discrimination while engaged in systems like prison, foster care, and child welfare. We'll soon be releasing proof of concept findings from a micropilot in Los Angeles with women who performed unpaid care work at home while also working as home health aides and medical assistants, which are often underpaid roles. Another standalone project, Time to Care, uses a mixed method mobile app to survey caregivers across the country on the way GI impacts their decisions around time use. And all of this work elicits important reflections on the value of paid and unpaid care in our society, and the current need for more robust policy supports for carers. Finally, we also have a critical ethnography that's ongoing with artists in St. Paul and rural Minnesota who are receiving GI over several years. This work has raised questions about economic justice across the arts sector and highlighted the connections between urban and rural spaces. Our portfolio is both wide-ranging and deep, and one of our strengths as a center is creating the conditions for both cross-site analyses at a high level and thoughtful analyses of specific, under-recognized, and underserved populations, all while taking the nuances of place, policy, and geography into account. So ultimately, the AMGIS and CGIR's work aims to challenge prevailing narratives around poverty and demonstrate the potential of unconditional cash, no strings attached, in supporting global efforts for dignified living. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Dr. DeYoung, for sharing information about our center's work and our emphasis on unique place and people. As a center, I want to say we're thrilled to be among a broader team of researchers generating evidence about guaranteed income in the United States right now. And finally, I am thrilled to introduce our last presenter, Ms. Velho.
Thanks again to the Global Income Security Network for having me here today. After these 4 fantastic presentations on guaranteed income experiences around mostly high-income countries, I'm here to shift our focus to low and middle-income countries. And specifically, I'll delve into evidence on how to effectively design social assistance programs to promote income security in low and middle-income settings. And the studies I'll be speaking about today were conducted by researchers affiliated with JPAL, where I work as a policy manager supporting our global office at MIT. But before we get into the evidence, let me briefly introduce you to JPAL. So JPAL stands for the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab. It is a research center launched in 2003 at MIT with the mission of reducing poverty by ensuring that policy is informed by scientific evidence. And our approach is grounded in the use of randomized evaluations, which are rigorous methods to assess the impact of interventions. We have a network of over 900 affiliated researchers from universities around the world who have conducted over 2,200 randomized evaluations across various sectors, including education, health, and social protection, among many other sectors. And this work helps policymakers and practitioners identify which programs are most effective and should be scaled up, and that in that way ensures that resources are used efficiently to achieve the greatest impact. And at JPAL, the evidence I'll be discussing falls under our social protection sector, which focuses on, as I mentioned before, identifying effective programs in low and middle income countries that provide financial assistance to low income families, ensure against shocks, break poverty traps, and support people through the life cycle. And we think of these programs in 2 buckets: social assistance programs, which seek to assist low-income families, and social insurance programs, which aim to insure people against economic shocks. And guaranteed income is one of the many forms of delivering social assistance, as we saw in earlier presentations, which also encompasses programs such as conditional cash transfers, public works programs, and many others. So the sector, the social protection sector, has a dedicated team, which I'm proud to be part of, working on 3 primary activities. Through funding competitions, we fund new cutting-edge research to fill key knowledge gaps in the social protection space. We also translate research findings into digestible, easy to understand evidence synthesis, most of which is publicly available on our website. And we conduct policy outreach to help partners understand how to apply global evidence to local contexts. And all this work is conducted under the academic leadership of Professors Rima Hanna and Ben Okun. Professor Hanna is from the Harvard Kennedy School, and Professor Okun is from MIT, and they're both the social protection sector co-chairs at JPAL. But you must be wondering, why only focus on low and middle income countries? And that's because in recent decades, social protection programs have become more and more common in low and middle income countries, but designing these programs in low and middle income settings entails challenges that differ from those faced in higher income economies. And this is for a few reasons. First, with lower tax collection, there is less fiscal space to fund social protection programs. Second, with limited information about people's income due to large informal sectors, it is challenging to identify people that should receive social protection. And then third, given weaker institutions, delivering benefits is more difficult in some lower middle income contexts. For example, if you have very high corruption levels, social transfers meant for vulnerable families may be diverted due to corruption. And then finally, despite the growing social protection literature in low and middle income settings, we still don't have all the knowledge that we need to cope with these unique challenges. So for all these reasons, JPAL's social protection sector has prioritized taking stock of existing evidence in low and middle income countries and generating research to fill knowledge gaps in these contexts. And some of the evidence, this evidence that we look into in the sector provides relevant insights for governments considering how to design social assistance and whether to implement programs like guaranteed income. And we have a variety of studies looking into the different policy design choices that policymakers must navigate, which taken together can result in a guaranteed income design or in an entirely different program. And they include, among many other decisions, deciding what to give, so whether to provide cash, in-kind benefits like food or services or vouchers, determining whether transfers should be recurrent and smaller or large one-off payments, also known as lump sums or lumpy transfers. Another important choice is choosing between universal programs that benefit everyone and targeted programs that focus on the most vulnerable. And then policymakers also consider whether to include conditions for receiving the transfers, such as attending school or health checkups. And today we're going to focus on two of these choices, which are timing and size and whether to target. So starting with timing and size, we have some relevant evidence from Kenya from a study that tested a lump sum cash transfer of about $400 relative to a series of 9 monthly installments of $45. And this study found that at 9 months, monthly transfers were more likely than lump sum transfers to improve food security, whereas lump sum transfers were more likely to be spent on durables and investments in assets. However, 3 years after the transfers were dispersed, these differences dissipated. So these results suggest that the timing and size can affect outcomes differently in the short run, but perhaps not over longer time periods. Although one thing to keep in mind is that this program was only 9 months long, and the difference between the monthly transfers and the lump sum transfers was not particularly large. So maybe if the researchers had evaluated a longer term program for which the equivalent lump sum transfer would be more meaningful, they could have found a different result. Another study from Colombia evaluated a conditional cash transfer for education where participant families received $15 per month, conditional on their children attending school at least 80% of the required days that month. And then the researchers compared this conditional cash transfer to a variation of the program in which 2/3 of these good attendance funds were provided on the same bi-monthly basis, but 1/3 of the remaining funds for all months were distributed in a lump sum at the time the students were supposed to re-enroll in school. And in this case, simply postponing some of the cash transfers to a large lump sum paid at the time of re-enrollment increased enrollment in both secondary and tertiary institutions without reducing daily attendance, particularly so for the poorest students and those most at risk of dropping out. So this evaluation also suggests that the timing and size matter if there are big expenses like school that are hard to save for. Another set of studies that are investigating this issue are the ones looking at lumpy asset transfers, such as the graduation approach. So the graduation approach is typically a holistic 2-year program that provides ultra-poor households with a business asset bundled with training, consumption support, and coaching on economic and psychosocial well-being. And several studies show that the graduation approach causes broad and lasting economic impacts on consumption in some cases even 10 to 11 years after the intervention started, suggesting that lumpy asset transfers might also play a role in lifting people out of poverty. And to wrap up this set of results, let me tell you about another example from Kenya. So this is a guaranteed income example. It's an ongoing study that's currently being conducted by JPAL affiliated researchers, which is comparing different cash transfer models that varied in timing and size of transfers. So in this study, the researchers randomly assigned 295 villages with about 23,000 people to receive either a long-term UBI with 12-year monthly payments of about $22, a short-term UBI with 2-year monthly payments of about $22 as well, a large lump sum payment of about $500, or assign some people or some villages to be in a comparison group where they receive no transfer. And then 2 years into the program, the 3 groups with the transfer had received about the same amount, but with 2 key differences. So the UBI groups received recurrent smaller transfers, while the lump sum group received the whole amount at once. And only the long-term UBI group expected to receive transfers for the remaining 10 years of the study. And at the 2-year mark, the study observed meaningful impacts in all 3 transfer groups on economic activity and savings behavior, but impacts were the largest in the lump sum group and in the long-term UBI group. So monthly profits at the village level increased by 65% in lump sum villages, 52% in long-term UBI villages, and 27% in short-term UBI villages, relative to an average profit of about $54,000 in villages that did not receive any form of transfer. Additionally, compared to villages that did not receive a transfer, the number of enterprises increased in villages where people received lump sums or long-term transfers, but not in villages where people received short-term transfers. And the increased economic activities stemmed mainly from enterprises not in the agricultural sector, but mostly in the retail sector. And then the third key finding of this study is that households in all transfer groups increased their savings, and specifically people in the long-term and lump sum transfer groups increased the amount of money they put into rotating savings and credit associations, with a much larger impact in the long-term group. And these findings suggest that people receiving the long-term UBI had a greater incentive to save for a larger future investment, while those who received a large lump sum transfer have less need to save, and those who receive only a short-term transfer might not want to save. So taken together, these results suggest that within 2 years of the intervention, this study is still happening, and there will be more results coming up over the years. People who received a lump sum transfer or anticipated continuing to receive a monthly transfer in the long run were more likely to make upfront investments to facilitate economic opportunities and ultimately create a path out of poverty than people who received a short-term transfer or no transfer at all. So looking at these studies, there is not really a strong takeaway that we can pull out, but they suggest that certain combinations of timing and size of transfers might equip people to make investments needed to escape poverty. One important thing to note, though, is that people may benefit differently from different payment schedules. So a family seeking to start a business but struggling to save may benefit from a large transfer to invest in their businesses, while an individual who's not planning on making a large investment might be better off with more spread out payments and avoiding the stress that comes with managing a large transfer. And understanding approaches that work for different people with different needs is an important area for future research. Now I'll switch to the second program design choice we're discussing today, which is whether to target transfers. So making eligibility to social assistance universal has several advantages, as we discussed in the previous talks. First, it promotes fairness and equity by granting access to everyone, though in practice, sometimes take-up is not universal for other factors preventing enrollment, such as complicated application processes or long wait lists when there is a limited budget. Another advantage is that universal eligibility also has the potential to reduce administrative costs related to data collection to target households, though these costs are usually small compared to the benefits being given out. Then A third benefit is that universal programs might also have smaller effects on people's propensity to work, as benefits don't rely on earned income, though again, working less is not a typical issue in low and middle income countries as a result of social assistance programs. And also, universal access could reduce the scope for corruption and other abuses of power in determining who gets to receive assistance. And despite all of these advantages, the arguments for and against universal programs usually tend to come down to budgets. So with the limited budget, more universal programs typically transfer substantially less resources to each beneficiary than targeted programs. But on the other hand, expanding budgets to provide higher transfers to all can be quite expensive. So especially in low and middle income countries, where differently from high income countries, it's not easy to tax back from middle income individuals due to the large informal economy. And a study conducted by the social protection sector co-chairs at JPAL looks into this trade-off in the context of Indonesia and Peru. And it shows that assuming a fixed budget, targeted programs tend to transfer more benefits than universal programs to low-income families, leading to higher overall welfare in those countries. However, this comes with the exclusion of people due to error in targeting methods. Moreover, political considerations significantly influence the effectiveness of targeting. So in many cases, the availability of the budget to fund programs is politically linked to the share of the population that benefits from the program. And when targeting too narrowly, there may be political resistance or reduced budget allocations as fewer people benefit and the program may be seen as a less politically appealing. So universal programs may look more attractive to the extent that universal eligibility expands the budget envelope through political economic considerations. Here again, there is no definitive answer. Determining whether to target ultimately hinges on the government's goals, the availability of information and right tools for targeting, the political climate around poverty targeting, and particularly on the relative importance the government gives to inclusion error, exclusion error, and the levels of benefits per person. So I know we're at time. So to wrap up, I wanted to just highlight a few key takeaways that we can pull up from this evidence. So as we discussed, we learned that, that low and middle income countries face unique challenges when designing and implementing social protection programs, and that social assistance is an important tool to help reduce poverty, improve livelihoods, and protect vulnerable groups. From a policy design perspective, a growing body of research is showing that size and transfer and frequency of transfers may matter, though it seems that different individuals benefit from different payment schedules, and more research is needed to understand the right design for people with different needs. As for targeting, the optimal choice will depend on government's goals and other local conditions, and this is a lesson that applies to other policy decisions we didn't have a chance to discuss today, such as conditionalities and what type of assistance to give. And if you look at the evidence, you'll see that these different design options typically improve different outcomes or benefit people differently. So in the end, how one balances the trade-offs in choosing program design depends on the policy objective in place. And with that, I'll hand it over back to Allison. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for closing out our presentations today, Ms. Belho. And the expansive work of JPAL globally has certainly served as a forerunner for the broader guaranteed income movement. And so thank you for all of the work that you and JPAL do. All right, thank you all to our presenters. And we are now going to pivot and ask our panelists a series of questions about the design and implementation of their work, their community and partner engagement, and the next steps and future of their work. So I'd like to start our question and answer section today. Let's bump this over to Mr. Strauss. So the question is, lessons learned or core considerations that you might share or recommend to new sites planning new GI programs?
Sure. I think it's important to include the population that you're trying to reach with the program in the design process for the program, so it's as attuned to their needs as possible. I'll just give an example of this feedback loop that we employed with Big Leap. We hosted a couple storytelling community events where we brought together all of the participants who had done media interviews, and we held roundtables about their experience with our program, their anxieties, what their families were up to. That was during and after disbursements. And those are crucial in shaping our approach to both communicating with participants who were current at the time and embedding a deep sense of empathy within the program. We'll also use those learnings to inform future program design should that happen in the city of Los Angeles. I'll also say in a similar vein, it's important to emphasize accessibility. By that, I mean, especially in a city like Los Angeles, where there is a deep digital divide and many languages spoken, it's important to reach people where they are. In service of that, in our pilot, we partnered with a number of community-based organizations, city council offices, even public libraries to open up their computer banks, make them available so folks could apply to Big Leap if they didn't have the ability to do so at home. And the application was available in the 9 most commonly spoken languages in Los Angeles. So those are 2 examples of things that people should keep in mind if they are designing a GI pilot.
Thank you very much. Dr. DeYoung, anything to add there?
Sure. I would just add that our data suggests, from a policy standpoint, that GI should operate alongside the existing safety net. So it's supplementing rather than replacing those critical benefits like housing and food and childcare vouchers. I also think dosage and duration need to be considered in light of the existing safety net. So, for places with lower costs of living and stronger safety nets, something like maybe $500 might be appropriate. But for places with minimal safety nets or structural constraints, a high cost of living, greater amounts or longer durations should be considered. And I think it's really context specific as well, as Ms. Velho also indicated in her presentation.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Kimberlin, you have such a unique opportunity to see across pilots. And so would love to hear insights from you as you consider what advice you might give to new programs starting up in the GI space.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to highlight it. Definitely the items that were highlighted by Mr. Strauss and Dr. DeYoung certainly are issues that we have heard come up again and again at the Basic Income Lab among groups that are starting up new pilots and programs. And I wanted to mention we have a very comprehensive guide prepared that is intended to be a resource to specifically for municipal governments that are looking to launch new basic income or guaranteed income pilots or programs that offers a sort of a lot of step-by-step walking through different decisions that need to be made as in terms of in the different phases of launching a new program. So in terms of the discovery phase, or sort of discovery or planning phase, moving into the selection and sort of design of the specific payments, and then also thinking about the launch and disbursement phase in terms of the practical kind of issues about how and when and through what vehicles to disperse payments, and then the data analysis and the final follow through. And so there's a lot of comprehensive information in there with a lot of learning from a lot of pilots and programs around the United States. And so I just want to offer that that's a resource available on the Basic Income Lab's website that I know many people here have contributed to and used. And so hopefully that can be a useful resource for people.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Velho, you summarized your core considerations so nicely at the end of your presentation, but wanted to give you an opportunity to add anything that you might offer in terms of advice to folks looking into starting guaranteed income pilots.
Sure. I think I would add to Dr. DeYoung's point on duration. In light of these results that we had from the Kenya example I mentioned, we have generally for governments thinking about implementing guaranteed income program. In this case, where we had an opportunity to compare different cash transfer models, we could see that people already made their decisions with the future in mind. So in this case, what we believe to be the reason for the impressive impacts we saw on the long-term UBI study, having this long-term expectation of receiving a future income seems to have been a key point there. So as governments think about implementing programs, maybe this is something to think about, and that could potentially increase the program's impact. Although we're still waiting to see long-term results of the program. Once we receive those results, we'll have a better sense of how important that aspect is. And I would just again go back to a general takeaway on low and middle income settings, where trade-offs between the different social assistance programs tend to be more stringent and harder to handle. I think just generally the idea that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to designing social assistance is really important, and thinking about objectives and what kind of program best suits those objectives is a really big priority.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Dr. Kim, you were able to share some findings from your first year, and from those data, would be interested if you have some core considerations that you might offer to program partners as they consider design and implementation decisions for GI pilots.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Dr. Verho. That reminds me, the long-term and short-term impact could be very different, and we're also excited to look at the long-term impacts. For the point, for the implementation of the study, well, we kind of suffer from big differences in terms of survey response rate between the control group and the treatment group. Like treatment group survey response rate is 100%, but treatment group is, the control group is 85%. Although we inform the control group as well, we're gonna follow you up for a long time. Like some people are really against to join the survey. So as a result, we kind of rely more on admin data, and the admin data is good, but in the beginning, in the first phase, we kind of not very careful to get the consent to use the admin data for a long time. So we kind of have to get the consent again to use the admin data, to their own admin, the admin data of the individual who participated in our study. One way to address is proposed by Esther Duflo. At some point, suppose that we reach 50% of the follow-up rates, then remaining 50%, we randomize the people who really survey more, like intense survey. Then then effective survey rate could be much larger if by doing so. So we, in the follow-up survey, we kind of introduced this technique to reach greater survey rates, effective survey rates. That's one thing. So that's something I'd like to share with you guys. And I just wonder, you guys survey rates, survey rate between control group and the treatment group. Maybe every study's experienced a similar thing. I checked the Finland data, and they also suffered a lot, big differences between treatment and the control group. Another point is how much you can monitor the income of the household or individual. We have discussions, in econ academic, we have kind of consensus that basic income is super expensive to reach. It's very expensive. That is the concern everybody shares. If we could, for example, so basic income it's very like Kenya. Kenya is maybe the only example. Maybe I'm wrong, but one of the few examples that like it is really universal. Like many basic income program have a target group. Like for example, California has like LA has a target group for the family members with children or pregnant women and children. Like they like every program has some specific target group. That's not like super universal basic income. I mean, if we have admin power to monitor the income very frequently, then why don't you like guaranteed income or negative income tax? Maybe could be much cheaper option to achieve the similar goal. But I just wonder you guys' opinion about this.
Yeah, we can certainly open that up. I will say to your first point about challenges regarding attrition and participation rates among the control group, certainly that's something that we've encountered at our center as well, and something that we work closely with our community partners to engage participants within our studies. So can certainly relate to that. And then thinking about sort of the broader notions of cost and also augmenting with additional data, such as admin data within our studies, certainly of interest as well. So if anybody wants to respond to that, I'll open it up.
I might just note, and I know, Ms. Belho, I think you spoke about some of this in your presentation as well, but that I think the cost benefit analysis is very important, and there are just so many different factors that feed into it for any particular program, I think. And so that's, I think, one of the things that I always think about in those conversations is the importance of thinking about, there's the clear cost of the amount of cash being distributed in payments, but also thinking kind of more broadly about costs and benefits in terms of how that interacts with other safety net programs, how it interacts with potentially reduced costs in other systems based on improved outcomes in health or education or other kinds of outcomes. And thinking also just not how it relates to the cost of administering programs. It's if there can be a different administrative structure or simpler, more streamlined administrative structure potentially could lead to reduced costs there. So thinking about that, and then also, and this is challenging, but I think really important, thinking about the long-term costs, not just the short-term costs, but how this may play out intergenerationally or over decades rather than just the short term. And so I feel like it's just important to keep those kinds of issues in mind in the cost benefit analysis. But of course, that's a lot of moving pieces. So it can be challenging to do that in a thoughtful way. But I think it is such a central question. I agree that comes up a lot in the conversations about what happens, in the analysis of pilots, but also what are the implications for implementation on a broader scale.
Yes, and I think circling back on the point around looking at the long-term results of the Kenya experiment, what's really important to think about is that at the 2-year mark, we had very similar impacts, both for the long-term UBI, but also for the lump sum transfer. So if in the long run, we don't observe similar effects for the UBI study, and we see that households or individuals who received both types of transfers are similar on average. Maybe the takeaway for this particular setting is that providing just this lump sum at the beginning could be more cost effective than providing a guaranteed income for 12 years. Yeah. So I think this is why it's so important for us to not take away very, very strong conclusions from the study at this point, but I think it's already indicating a very important role that providing income at a whole village level can have in terms of fostering economic activity and just generally providing economic growth and changing people's lives.
If I might weigh in here briefly, I think this all underscores the idea that this is actually such a personal experience for each participant. Like we can try to design policies that are as sweeping and far-reaching as possible, but each participant in these pilot programs or even permanent policy is going to have a different experience and actually be served best with a program with a slightly different design, whether it's something like a monthly or a lump sum decision might impact different people differently. So just wanted to mention that.
And I might just pipe up and put my qualitative hat on and say, I think that it really underscores as well the importance of mixed methods research and being able to draw on, the robust quantitative data, but also to have those participant narratives and individual experiences as well.
Thank you all. In the interest of time, I think we'll wrap this up with one final question and want to know, what are the next steps for your body of work or portfolio? Where do you see sort of the next steps of your organization or your body of work? What is the future of the work that you've discussed today? And let's start with Ms. Velho.
Thanks, Dr. Thompson. So I didn't have so much time to speak specifically about how JPAL operates, but we have what we call initiatives, which are research initiatives funding research on various areas of research. So in addition to working with researchers to help them implement research on the ground, we also fund research and work in this intersection between academia and policy, translating these findings, very technical findings, into digestible products and presentations to policymakers. So I would say we do have a social protection initiative under our social protection sector that's looking at issues such as questions around guaranteed income programs, but also many other types of programs that fit into social assistance and social insurance. So we've produced an evidence review highlighting key knowledge gaps in low and middle income settings and what kind of research questions that we may want to address with this initiative. We've held many pre-funding competitions at this point, and our hope is to continue being able to fund research on all those kind of programs. But I would say that that's the next step, is to continue filling these gaps. I feel that as we speak about the evidence, we see that there is not a silver bullet to think about these programs, as all the presentations touch here today. It's really very context specific, and the purpose of having this initiative is to be able to learn more about these open questions and how we can design programs that are addressing the different needs that people have.
Excellent. Yes, very much agreed. Dr. Kimberlin.
Thanks. I think I would highlight sort of three things that we're working on at the Basic Income Lab. So, I mean, one is just continually trying to make sure that we're updating the information we have available to reflect the current state of research and learnings from people implementing these pilots. So we strive to continue to be an up-to-date resource for people. A second thing is just looking at connections between guaranteed income and other related kinds of programs. Like we have a strong interest at the Center on Poverty and Inequality in baby bonds, sort of guaranteed assets, and also things like tax credits and those kinds of things that are other sort of variations that connect to the ideas behind basic income. And then finally, I just think in the United States in particular, it's really an exciting moment in terms of the number of pilots and programs that where evaluations are coming to a conclusion and findings being published within the next year and a half. So that's something we're excited to work with various partners on, including those on this call, on this webinar, and just make sure that that information gets out into the world for people to learn from it.
Great, thanks. Yep, we share your excitement there. Dr. DeYoung.
Yes, I would say in the short term, as we mentioned, we're in the process of writing up those findings and producing white papers for all of our pilot sites as part of that GISN series. And we're going to be disseminating this work in partnership with community members and government partners. I think there's just such an incredible network of people doing this work, from practitioners to researchers to advocates to policymakers. And so our hope is that people can draw from and benefit from our work that we produce at CGIR. I think in the long term, because we're implementing a common research methodology across all of our sites, we're actually in the process of building a singular data set, as I mentioned, and that will contain qualitative and quantitative information from upwards of 19,000 study participants across treatment and control. So it's an incredible resource, and this large data set will allow us to do those analyses by subgroup and really see for whom and under what circumstances GI might be most effective. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. Lots of connections in these responses. Mr. Strauss.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to say we share a lot of these same goals. We're about to have our long-awaited research study in hand, thanks to our wonderful partners at the University of Pennsylvania, and we're going to take that on the road. We want to get that in front of our community partners, in front of our elected officials and policy decision makers, to garner support for policies like these. We hope that the research report demonstrates the positive impacts of Big Leap on our participants in a number of the research areas, and potentially hone in on a different target populations, such as unhoused families, or even more specifically, something like those who have experienced intimate partner violence, which were key areas for research in our pilot. So we want to keep building on the momentum that we currently have.
Great, very exciting. And Dr. Kim, if you want to close us out and tell us about the future for the Seoul Safety Income Project, which you talked a little bit about in your presentation already.
Right. So I gotta propose one thing. We are planning to present our first year, second year result to various conferences, and I hope to see. I mean, I'm super excited to look at California's. Look at the Pennsylvania University team's academic results. Also Kenya result. JPAR team's work. Are you guys, and also look at the Stanford, like various outcomes from the Stanford team. Maybe if you are interested into joining APAM meeting or AEA meeting, APAM is usually in the fall. AEA meeting is January. Maybe we can create a session, to present our academic result to these conferences. I hope you are also interested in.
Dr. Kim, that's a wonderful idea. Our center is presenting at APAM, and certainly we would, I think, all benefit from talking about coordinated efforts to present together and to get our information out in various settings. So thank you for that suggestion.
Oh, then maybe it's too late, but we are happy to squeeze in.
Yes, we should talk about that afterward.
Yeah, sure thing.
Great. All right, well, thank you all. We are at time. And so this concludes the first of our webinar series entitled Guaranteed Income, Global Efforts for Dignified Living. I want to again thank the members of the Global Income Security Network, the Seoul Metropolitan Government, Yoonha Lee in particular for all her work organizing today, and the members of our panel, Dr. Kimberlin, Dr. Kim, Mr. Strauss, Dr. DeYoung, and Ms. Velho. Thank you all and have a good evening.